Our next speaker is Linda Geffin, and I've only met and learned of Linda's incredible work, and she is truly one of our sheroes in Houston. So she's a senior assistant county attorney at the Harris County Attorney's Office, and she's the chief of their Special Prosecution Unit. The unit uses the power of injunctive relief to close down businesses that are hotbeds of criminal activity, such as human trafficking. There are more people held in slavery today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. Linda says her work to fight modern slavery was inspired many years ago by a quote from Eli Wiesel. There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. Linda has drawn national attention to human trafficking in an appearance on NBC's Today Show, numerous radio programs, Texas Monthly, newspapers throughout the state. She was selected as one of 10 Women on the Move in 2011 by the Texas Executive Women. Linda is living a passion, and she wouldn't be able to do what she does if she didn't have that. So she's a model, I think, for us to share with our children, and help me welcome her. Linda.
Good morning. Good morning. It's truly an honor to be here amongst a group of entirely and wholly passionate people. And I feel at home in this group, and I thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the opportunity to share one of my passions. And one of the things that I think also inspires me is growing up, my childhood was steeped with the concept of tikkun olam, which is from the Hebrew, but it means basically that the world is a broken vessel, and it is each and every one of ours responsibility to repair where we find it is where we are driven. And so I have been involved in human trafficking, and I have found that many times people, even though it is extraordinarily prevalent right now, don't know that it exists. I have been in the brothels, in the cantinas. I have been closer than this to the victims, trying to convince them to come with me. And it is a complicated and multi-layered process. But I believe that we will be able to bring relief, hope, and an end to this within the next couple of decades. I wish I could say tomorrow, but the opportunity to raise awareness, such as we have here today, will speed the process along. So these victims are generally involved because they've been threatened, coerced, beaten, and numerous other experiences that do keep them voiceless. They're treated like commodities, much like products with a barcode. And human trafficking is, we don't have a clicker, so if you see odd hand signals, it's, oh, we do? Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, you should be able to just hit this button.
Thank you, sir. So this is sort of just a visual to let you know that it is everywhere. Backpage is still selling young girls. Craigslist, I think, has stepped back a little bit. But you don't have to walk very far from this building to find brothels, cantinas, and all kinds of the commercial sex slave industry, as well as labor trafficking and other types of bondage. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining by any means, any person for labor or services involving forced labor, slavery, or servitude. That is the definition that is drawn from the federal laws that were enacted by the TVPA many years ago. And as we mentioned earlier, it is astonishing to me that in 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And from that, we did have many people that were led to freedom against great odds. And in 1965, the 13th Amendment became part of the law of the land. And yet, truly, we have more slaves globally than we ever did during the whole transatlantic slave industry. So slavery still exists. It is a growing and lucrative business. Some of the hard facts are that the estimates are that there's between 10 and 30 million people in bondage today. Many people in this field think that's low. These folks encompass children, adults, men, women, girls, boys, and it's growing. It is the fastest growing criminal industry globally, right behind the arms and gun. Click for me, please. So here in the United States, this is probably a low figure as well. It's closer now to 22,000 people trafficked into the United States. So that's nationals from other countries who are tricked, lured, promises of good jobs. And my experience in speaking with these folks are that they were promised a job, and all they wanted to do is to send food home to their families. They may have left children behind. They may have left parents behind. Many of them are from very poor, small rural villages, and they come to America with the promise of a great job as a waitress and as a bartender or as a housekeeper. And typically what happens is as soon as they're brought across the border, their passports are taken, they're beaten, they're raped, they're gang raped, and their wills are broken down. So this figure should be concerning. And children are trafficked every 30 seconds, according to UNICEF. Their figures are probably low. Here, or nationally, 450,000 children run away from home, and within 48 hours, they are caught up in the commercial sex slave trade. Here in Harris County, the figure is we have about 6,000 runaways in Harris County. And again, within 48 hours, a third or 2,000 children will be taken under a pimp's control, a trafficker's control. They are raped. They are told that they're in love with them, and they are gradually brought through the process where they are under control of the pimp. This, to me, is a very interesting fact. Back when slavery was legal, during that blight on American history, only wealthy landowners had slaves. It was the huge plantation owners, because having a slave was a very expensive proposition. Nowadays, you can buy a human being for 90 bucks. And if that doesn't hurt your heart, I don't know. The idea of connecting humans to a price tag is so abhorrent to me. And actually, the latest figures are that it's $70. Now, I do focus in my work on the commercial sex slave trade, but labor trafficking is ever present, and it may even be equal in this country. In that, for instance, after Hurricane Ike, many of you were in Houston during Hurricane Ike, they brought busloads of poor laborers from Mexico and Central America. They kept them housed in shacks. They worked 15, 18 hours a day, got paid a few pennies, were not allowed to leave. That's trafficking. And these are some children working in commodity fields. Many of the commodities we use every day are infused with slave labor. And victims that are enslaved in criminal enterprises, such as bondage and the lady trafficking, commercial sex slave trade. They're tricked, they're coerced, and it's not just a matter of stealing their freedom. They're stealing their will. They're breaking them down into a package so that they can use them. And I have to be honest and tell you that we just passed Halloween. One of the things I often try to do as we approach Halloween is to let people know that one of the most prevalent things I see on shelves is Hershey's, which is largely made up of child labor. Studies have shown that where there's child labor, there's usual sexual exploitation. There is something called the Harkin-Engel Protocol, which was signed by many of the chocolate industries, CEOs, and many of them are in Africa on the Ivory Coast. And yes, many of them have signed it, but they don't follow it. And lately, with more pressure, Raise the Bar, Hershey's, and other social groups to bring awareness to this problem, they've decided, okay, they will follow it in 2020. So we have another 8 years of kids out in the fields, getting beaten, whether they have produced enough or not enough, getting sexually exploited, and being, most importantly, deprived of an education and keeping the cycle of poverty going. I have an iPhone, so therefore I too have purchased slave labor before I knew it, but I'm happy to tell you there's now an app for that. It's called Free to Work. You can actually download it for your iPhone or your Android, and it will tell you if you run a barcode on a product, the supply chain that came to you on that product, and it will save you a lot of money because you probably won't want to buy as many things once you realize they come from sweatshops and off of the backs of children. Now, this is the cold cash involved. It is an extraordinarily profitable business. $32 billion generated annually. And as I mentioned earlier, it is right under arms and guns. What my studies have found lately is that it's so profitable that the drug cartels are switching into the buying and selling of humans. Now, why would that be? Because if you buy a key of cocaine, you sell it, and you have to take your profit and turn around and buy some more. But if you buy a human, you sell it, you get the profit, they come back, you send them back. It's a no-lose cash-wise situation, and I believe that figure is probably a little bit higher now. I was curious as I started looking at these figures. So while we know that trafficking is fueled by demand for cheap labor, cheap sex, and cheap goods, and there's a huge movement to stop the demand, I thought, what does that figure actually mean? I can't relate to billions. So I looked up and I saw that ExxonMobil's profit about a year ago was $32.3 billion. Walmart, which seems to be, probably there's as many cantinas and massage parlors that are fronts for trafficking as Walmarts. They seem to be everywhere. $15.7 billion, but human trafficking, $32 billion off of the spirits, the backs, and the souls of human beings. I was still curious. The gross national product of the Cayman Islands, $0.93 billion. U.S. Virgin Islands, many of us have vacationed there, beautiful place, 2.1, and Iraq, just to throw in a less lovely country, 16 billion, still not as large as the profit made from the buying and selling of our children. So here in Houston, we have the perfect storm. In Houston, we have I-10, 59, the ship channel, 2 major airports, and a very porous border. So this gives us the rather unfortunate and unique nomenclature to be a hub for human trafficking. In Houston, we are a training station. In other words, victims are brought here to be trained, so they're beaten into submission, They're trained into the commercial sex slave industry, and then they're sent off I-10, 59, 45 to other brothels, other massage parlors that are fronts for prostitution. And so we have training brothels in Houston. I can tell you where they are. And it's also an avenue. In a couple of years ago, the Department of Justice certified I-10 as a corridor for guns, drugs, and people. Now, these are some of the fronts of human trafficking that I've personally worked on. There's many, but you see these in strip centers all around town. These are in the northwest part of the county. VIP, QQ Night, Good Times. All of these contain women who were not allowed to leave. If you go in any one of these, you walk in, there's a foyer, there's a sleeping area. I can't call it a bedroom because they're mainly mattresses on the floor. You go down there, there's a kitchen in a space a third the size of this room. And then on the other side, there's where the women are forced to work. And they're pretty much all set up the same way. I remember going into one of them, and I walked in, and the traffickers are very smart. They take the women, they work there for a little while, and then they put them in buses in the middle of the night, and they bring them to other locations. So this particular group had recently arrived, and they didn't have time to unpack. But I noticed that one young lady unpacked one thing that just stayed with me, and that is her suitcase was there with the LAX tag on it, but she'd taken out her teddy bear and put it on her mattress. And I thought, these children who are not even understanding anything, where they are, the language they speak, and they're right across the hall on the shower table with a man who paid $40 for her services. This is La Costa Nina. Fortunately, after a long investigation, it was finally shut down. If you see in the middle picture the taco truck, can you see it? Well, the deal there is you go up to the guy in the taco truck, you give him your money, and for your money, you get a condom and a girl. So you go in there and you pick one of the girls that are sitting along there, and then you go in the back behind a door like that, and these places are full of secret passageways, hallways, a little zigzag of a way to get back to where the women are forced to go. And a partner of mine said, I wouldn't keep livestock in the kinds of areas where these women are forced to go. There's mattresses on the floor outside, they look like horse stalls, and 15, 18 times a night they go back there. Or if they show any resistance at all, the human trafficker who controls her, I have seen this told to me on more than one occasion. They've done their research. They've researched the town, the family, where they're from. They have pictures of their family, and they would say, you will be going back there. Oh, I saw Jose going to school today. Hold up a picture and tear it in half. You can threaten a person, and I think they will go to great lengths to escape from a horrible situation. But when you start threatening family, kids, parents, it really stops there. So raising awareness is something I have become quite passionate about. When I sat this close to women in La Costa Nina and tried to tell them every possible way how they would be safe, and they wouldn't come. There's something in the trafficking business where a trafficker will trust a particular female that maybe's been, is a trafficking victim, but maybe it's been with him or her. There's women in charge of these businesses as well. And they are given the label of the bottom bitch. And whenever I would sit down next to anybody, that person would come up next to me and make sure that person that I was trying to speak to wouldn't speak to me. So we did have the opportunity to do some undercover work and film on MSNBC something called Sex Slaves in Texas, which I was proud to be able to participate, but it was on MSNBC, and I wanted to call my daughter and tell her, and it felt odd to say, honey, mommy's on Sex Slaves in Texas. But we also had the opportunity to go on the Today Show and raise awareness there. But Many people think that this is something that happens to, and it does generally prey on the vulnerable, the uneducated, the poor, the needy. But I am here to tell you that these powerful organizations that have been taken over by cartels who have everything at their disposal saw the work that we were doing. And September 17th of last year, I had a hit taken out on me. And they came to my house and beat me unconscious for a day and a half. So this is me. And it's a story that the Chronicle ran about the efforts of these particular cartels to stop me from doing what I was doing. And I can tell you, they can hit me in the head, but they can't quiet me because other people don't have a voice. And although I did sustain a skull fracture, traumatic brain injuries, and some other injuries, I'm very grateful to have recovered to the extent I have, with very few challenges that I'm still working on. But I show that to let you know no one is immune. We can't drive by it and say, not in my neighborhood. It is in everybody's neighborhood, and it can affect anybody, no matter how protected you think you are. You're not. So every human being has rights. I think we'll all agree on that. And some of the answers that I think might be helpful to help abolish slavery is education and funds for the large nonprofits who are doing this work, and for places like this to learn about it, talk about it, share the word. Governments, in my opinion, ought to be doing more because every country has enacted laws to abolish slavery, but they don't really enforce it very well. It's a global problem. The UN has been a leader in enforcing the anti-slavery movement, but they don't also have a plan to bring it forward. And we all, unfortunately, until we learn about it, buy slave-driven products almost every time we go to the grocery store. Coffee, chocolate, sugar, diamonds, gold are all made off the backs of victims. So many common commodities are produced by children and slave laborers, and some of the products that you can buy fair trade, there's more and more these days. You can have whole celebrations with flowers, fair trade chocolate, fair trade produce. There is fair trade coffee, very available, whether it's in Whole Foods or Sam's. Maybe for a conversation for later, but I would avoid that particular place if you're trying to drink coffee that's slave-free. There's a website called uncoolbeans.com, and you may find some more information on the website and the blog, and there's a Facebook page. And there's also many great organizations who are doing this kind of work, have been doing this kind of work. Polaris Project is one, notforsale.com, Free the Slaves. One of the things, if anybody of you are local, a friend of mine by the name of Kat French is doing something, has started this not too long ago. It's called Exodus Cry Houston Prayer Watch. It is faith-based, but she is so impassioned about letting people know and therefore getting more people committed to fight this fight and abolish slavery that she will take you on a van tour to the cantinas throughout and the massage parlors where this horrible, heinous crime is happening. Now that's Kat French at Exodus Cry, Houston Prayer Watch. Now, another person I know very well is Dottie Laster. She's a one-woman heat-seeking missile to go after victims and has rescued more victims individually than anybody I know. She will offer you training or your group's training, and she is an extraordinary expert in this field. So who are the game changers? Well, of course, we know that Abraham Lincoln started it by being an ethical, fair-minded president. One of my particular favorites is Sojourner Truth. She was 6 foot tall, a freed slave who went on to give many, many speeches to help abolish slavery and to help freed slaves and those who still weren't free claim their freedom. I also like this guy, Frederick Douglass, who did try to abolish slavery before it was cool, and he's had done a lot of work in this field. So who else are the game changers? Well, anybody who will spend some time listening to what the true facts are. So you Bioneers are game changers, and now that you know about it, it will, I think, impact your life. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the next 5 minutes, but it's going to sink in. And I have been very inspired by LOISL because there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never, ever be a time when we fail to protest. Become a voice for the voiceless, and I want to thank you for hearing my voice today.